I just threw away the last week of my life watching and taking clips from over 12 hours of Sonic Frontiers reviews. Yes, the title's real. And it's safe to say, Sonic Frontiers is very divisive. It's the Wild West of Sonic games. While there's a lot of very good and valid praises and critiques, there's also some pretty dog ones that seemingly miss the whole point.
A stupid way for the player to get bored and waste their time.
This video isn't going to be a big cope treating Frontiers like it's flawless perfection, but I'm also not going to act like it's way worse than it actually is. We've waited literally 5 years for this, so I want to show a bit of every side to be as fair and good faith as possible to all of the creators I clipped here. So all love and no hate to anyone here. But first, 6 seconds, drop a like, check your subs, why not hit the bell so you can get my notification, huh? And let's just jump into it.
Starting with the open zone, this was the best part about the game.
Let's start with the new thing Frontiers introduces to Sonic fans, an open world format. Or, sorry, Azuka announced this was not an open world, but was actually the world's first open zone game.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Mario Odyssey.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Mario Odyssey.
The big divide in opinion here is on whether these are full of stuff or empty. And they're both right in a way.
But these hubs are big with lots of things to do within them.
I was super relieved by the pure amount of things to do in this open world, because one huge worry that I had coming into this game was that the open world would feel empty.
On paper, it sounds bad, but playing it, it's really not. I really enjoyed it, especially in the first world. The first world I actually thought was the most fun world.
These vast zones are filled with tons of challenges, platforming, enemies, and collectibles, but yet they still feel so empty. And that's because visually they are.
But it is very empty.
Sonic not feeling like he belongs in this cut and paste world is indicative of a larger problem, which is that Sonic doesn't feel like he belongs in most of what the game has to offer.
Until you get to the third island, there's no landmarks or Sonic set pieces in the world. Looking back at the fly-through without any of the game elements in it, there's really nothing that says Sonic about this world.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm still not really sold on the art design of this game. Plenty of people have already made the Sega hire this man joke, but yeah, the generic looking Unity demo ass environments with all the floating rails and platforms, it's not really doing it for me.
But overall, yes, the open worlds are pretty lifeless, and it does feel pretty uninspired from a design perspective as well.
And opinions on design aside, as while it's unoriginal, I didn't mind it too much, and a lot of people actually liked it.
And then the big open world just looks great. You know, I always love rolling hills and just ruins. I'm so into that whole aesthetic, the whole overgrown ruins thing, and yeah, it looks really good.
The blend of untouched ruins and crazy Sonic staples like springs and rails feels like it should clash. It should clash, right? And yet, I found the blend of the two worlds charming.
And I definitely don't think it's the worst part about Sonic Frontiers. But this next part probably is one of them.
So, throughout the entire marketing of Frontiers, it was promoted as having 5 Starfall Islands to explore.
Now this game has 5 islands, but let's cut the crap. We all know there's really only 4 islands, and with the last one having been, no joke, cut and spliced off of the first island, the last one's really just half an island.
Things got worse when folks went into the files for the game and saw that Island 4 and 5 were both named after the first one, meaning that in a last attempt to make the game seem longer, I can only assume, Sonic Team took the originally massive Kronos Island, split it up into 3, and called it a day.
So there's only 3 different environments throughout all of the open zones.
The 5 Starfall Islands are Forest, Desert, Mountain, Forest, and Forest.
And with no Sonic loops, checkers, or literally anything unique or from Sonic's world here, these worlds are just okay at best, and at worst, lifeless and unfitting for Sonic. And if you're gonna be that, at least give me some fucking variety.
Why not do something like a abandoned city? Or lean harder into something like a real true snow biome?
If you want my opinion, I think Sonic Team should have shrunk all the islands here. I think instead of having 4 islands that take around 3 to 4 hours to complete, there should have been like 7 that took 2 to 3.
And with many reviewers noting that the gameplay loop felt pretty repetitive.
Yeah, it's pretty repetitive, you know? It's a fairly long game. It took me 25 hours or something to beat.
So rather than having 7 smaller islands, I would I'd rather they just delivered on 5 unique islands, as that's kinda what was expected here.
Throughout the entire marketing of Frontiers, it was promoted as having 5 Starfall islands to explore.
I also wouldn't say they marketed it as having 5 islands, as Azuka refused to say the amount anytime he was asked.
How many Starfall islands are there? I can't answer yet.
And we only knew about the 5 close to release because of the Gamescom build leak, where some guy bugged it to play further than the first island. Wow, I never thought I'd defend Sonic Team on something.
This world has an alarming lack of color that is so underscored whenever you contrast it with the color present in the cyber stages. It just doesn't look good. This is a game that is coming to all platforms, including the Switch. It does feel like they baselined the visuals on what the Switch was capable of and then just shipped that for every other platform.
Well, sure, I guess it could be a little brighter. The lack of visual identity this game faces comes from the lacking structures and identity within, and not really the color so much. Personally, I like the toned down colors of the open world, and think if it was as bright as Sonic Heroes, it wouldn't really convey the melancholy tone Frontiers is trying to present.
They immediately provide this stark contrast, highlighting just how bland and lifeless the open world sections feel. These brief snippets we get here, this is how the whole game should look.
And while yes, the open world is kind of bland and lifeless, the reason the cyberspace stages are so bright and saturated is because they're not a part of that melancholy tone. Hence why the music transforms into like EDM bangers. But now let's move into something Sonic Frontiers actually does right.
The biggest thing is the controls. They feel so smooth, and you can even cater them to your liking.
What can I say? It just feels nice to move Sonic around in a 3D environment, which really shouldn't be too much to ask for from a 3D Sonic game, but you'd be surprised.
Now, how Sonic controls is another one of the more divisive topics.
Sonic controls alright, but he doesn't control great.
And it is every bit as fun as it looked, and even more fun. Like, just zipping around the world, it feels so good.
I think I would safely call this the greatest Sonic has ever controlled in 3D. It's just not there yet.
2D or 3D, the level design in the open world is fine, but it's Sonic's handling that I was just not fond of at all. This should have been the easy part.
And referring only to the open world gameplay's controls, I actually think this is really good. For what this game is going for, this feels like the best combination of freedom to move around from adventure and feeling of going fast from boost games. And this will take time to get used to, as this doesn't feel similar to any previous Sonic games.
The boost being on the right trigger was the hardest thing to adjust at first. That's never been the case in any boost game.
Frontiers changed the button mapping from previous games, and while that sounds like something I'd complain about, I thought it was easy to get used to, and hell, even came to prefer it. Boosting on R2 just feels comfortable.
In my opinion, the boost should have always been R2. That's like what it is in every game with a boost. Why is Sonic different? But again, even simple changes like face button swaps apparently do cause a lot of confusion among the general population.
The light speed dash to trail across lines of rings whenever you see them, though it was the weirdest fucking thing having to now press on the left stick to perform that. But it's better than having everything mapped to one button. It's also why they probably put the homing attack back on the side of the face buttons like it was in Sonic Unleashed.
So bigger gameplay changes, like Sonic moving like he never has before, are going to be difficult for a lot of people to grasp. At least until you get used to it a bit more.
I started to master the controls. You know, I just kind of got them down. They're still janky. They're definitely not perfect, but like I just started to understand them a little bit more.
But there is a problem with him having a lack of weight. For example, you could be boosting full speed, but the second you stop holding forward, Sonic will stop on a dime, which does feel a little off, and I do hope something like this can get addressed in future titles.
No matter how fast you're traveling, Sonic stops on a dime when you let go of the control stick.
Like, it's a little strange that no matter how fast you're going, you can instantly stop on a dime just by letting go of the stick.
And this is something that visually looks a little eerie, having him just run 100 miles an hour and instantly stop. But gameplay-wise, to pull off a lot of these tight platforming sections, this actually helps the player a lot.
His meter controls feel very responsive, and it makes platforming feel pretty good.
And Frontiers has a handful of other similar gameplay quirks that reviewers noted as well.
When Sonic isn't sticking to the floor, that is. Sonic's collision is terrible in this game. He's got super glue stuck to his feet and sticks to most surfaces he's on.
And just like the stopping, this looks really weird.
Why is my blue boy magnetized to the ground?
But without this, you'd be hearing a lot more of
the walls and floors will send you flying.
Something that didn't happen very much in my playthrough because of him being magnetized to the ground. The world in Frontiers is not flat, and with all these little bumps, if he went flying on every one, oh man, that'd be so annoying.
The way you're sort of like magnetized to the ground can be annoying at times.
That said, they really did us dirty by putting an open lava pit directly under an incline. Like, why?
While you can go flying off ledges and rails with crazy speed, momentum isn't exactly this game's focus.
Now, whether you love or hate Frontiers will be determined by one single factor: the gameplay loop.
Sonic Frontiers follows a very basic formula for how you're going to get through each of the 4/5 Starfall Islands.
But like you fight bad guys to get gears, and you use the gears to unlock the portal levels, and you do the portal levels to get the keys, and you get the keys to unlock the emeralds, and you do the emeralds to beat the level and the boss. It's a little much.
If that was confusing, here's this handy dandy chart that should show you how it all works. There you go, you're welcome, have fun with that.
That's kind of your loop there. Exploring, doing what you want when you want. The game takes the shackles off you almost instantly. I'm talking like 20, 30 minutes. You're pretty much free to do whatever you want.
But one thing I've noticed across all reviews is that if you don't like the general gameplay loop of Frontiers, there's like a next to 0% chance you're gonna like this game.
I don't think the game is that good since it's long and doesn't have a super stimulating core gameplay loop.
But if you do like the loop, chances are you're gonna like this game.
This turned out a lot better than I expected it to. I went in there with very low expectations and I was very pleasantly surprised.
But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. A key to enjoying this gameplay loop is the challenges and minigames, something that makes up a majority of the open zones. And it's easily the most divisive part of this game.
When I jumped off the starting line of the sprint across Sonic's first open world game, I certainly didn't expect to play jump rope.
These zones are filled with a variety of unique, tiny little mini-games that are bite-sized and super easy to accomplish.
I'm gonna be honest, doing boring puzzles is not really my idea of good Sonic gameplay.
And there are lots of different kinds, and it's kind of cool. Whenever you do one, they reveal a part of the map. Like, they just kind of slowly reveal the map through these little challenges, which is a fun idea.
Doing them unlocks sections of the map and rails to help you traverse quickly, and despite what some people say, are actually really useful.
If you manage to solve the crazy brain-busting puzzles that 9 times out of 10 are solved by drawing a circle, your reward is more rails to clutter up the map, in case you thought traversing the open world as Sonic was somehow boring.
Which, if you've only played the first 2 islands, aren't that helpful, but those traversal rails you unlock are super useful on the 3rd island, Chaos, where the entire thing is literally disconnected like an outdoor school.
There's a bunch of islands that are not connected super well, so you have to go way out of your way to go from one island to the other or find a bird to take you there, and it's just such a fucking headache.
I actually liked that I had to work to unlock more rails and traversal options instead of having every island be fully revealed upon discovery. The sense of exploration is fully integrated into every aspect of Sonic Frontiers.
Other than the tutorial and a couple you need for story progression, all of these challenges and minigames are optional.
Plus, the missions open up your map screen piece by piece, so while you technically don't need to see your entire map to beat the game, why wouldn't you want to?
Which is nice, but there's not really any other option.
There's so much wasted potential of Sonic's control scheme because they're more obsessed with copy-pasting the same 6 or 7 puzzles over and over again.
Now, to contrast that, the thing that I actually think made these minigames and challenges pretty charming is that there's a feeling of uniqueness to most of them, and whenever you do see the same format used again, it's in a slightly more challenging and progressed way.
Yes, the game does get more challenging over time. It's not like really hard, you're not going to be dying like in Cuphead, but it does get challenging.
Some of these puzzles, though, are stupid easy, but they do get harder as you move from island to island. Well, kind of, I guess.
While, yeah, super easy, I overall do think these were fun, and think if they made them much more challenging like Sonic fans want, people would be doing the opposite and complaining about, oh, these are too difficult. Do you expect a kid to beat this? I mean, it's Sonic Frontiers, not Portal.
There are these moments where your friends will want you to do something for them, but it's the most mindless shit ever. Cut grass with the Psyloop. Push Coco to the goal. Break boxes to get nuts and bolts. Exciting.
Okay. These little goofy mini-games are pretty fun. I like this shit.
Instead of puzzles, there could have been more cool movement-based challenges or just something else to unlock parts of the map, I don't know. Anything but this.
When you consider all this, though, and how Sonic is so fun to control at times, I have to wonder who decided that boring, easy puzzles was the best way to go about the mission structure. Who needs rushing around lush and varied locales while dodging badniks and engaging with fun gimmicks, all while doing so in style, when you could be walking on panels?
And I think a lot of the hate for the challenges and minigames can be summed up with
Sonic fans just simply want to have more Sonic.
But I personally enjoy variety in a game, and don't think more Sonic gameplay is a good break from the main Sonic gameplay.
There's a surprising amount of variety here, which is appreciated, and most of the challenges go by quickly, feeling like bite-sized obstacles rather than long-winded stops that hinder the quick pace the series is known for.
But Frontiers kept me guessing, even late into the campaign, with what it would try next. Even when some of those ideas didn't work, I was almost always glad that Sega gave it the old college try, and as a result, I rarely found myself bored.
Mario can afford to do whatever the fuck it wants because the core idea is so flexible, but Sonic? Not so much.
While I would agree Sonic's core gameplay shouldn't drift away too far from what makes it good, and Sonic Team experimenting has been historically bad, but to take a different pace and try out new things in an optional minigame, I say Sonic Team, go wild.
Walk up to a pixie and press the square button. Oh, wonderful. Could have easily made this spirit thing a race like in Secret Rings, but no, I guess.
And there actually is a couple race challenges in Frontiers, but I would be willing to agree there definitely should be more.
Game feels very empty. The world is very empty, but there's a lot in it, like these little mini games.
And that's why this world is full of challenges and minigames, which some will like and some won't, but despite all of that, still lacks the structures and identity of a Sonic game.
Actually, you know what, fuck it. Since I'm on the subject of cyberspace levels now, I'm just gonna go out and say, these were the worst bits of the game for me.
Now, the cyberspace stages will be a mixed bag for a lot of people. Some people will love them.
These cyberspace levels just kick ass.
And some people will hate them.
Well, these portal gears get you access to the cyberspace levels, which as predicted, are easily the worst part of the game.
These were just shockingly abysmal.
So to make up a second playstyle and have this game not be so jarring to Boost fans, they added 30 levels, mostly reused, but a couple original, which I think is fine given the sheer quantity of levels, but even when you look at it, there are apparent issues.
Like, it's actually comical how there's only 4 types of cyberspace levels, 3 of which are just Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary.
I gotta wonder why, even when you consider the in-game reason for these themes being pulled from Sonic's memories, why only stick with 4?
But that excuse gets thrown out the fucking window when you see there are certain levels that are completely original. What's the reason now, Sega?
I feel like an appropriate number would be 12 zones to have. It would make it feel not as repetitive, but 4? Come on!
I truly don't care what asinine story explanation they have for the fact that a bunch of these cyberspace layouts are just recreations of previous levels in the series. It's just kind of pathetic to be reusing level layouts and graphical assets from previous games like this.
And while I do have an issue with there only being 4 level aesthetics, I think the fact that this is a side game, but still has more of these type of levels than most mainline Sonic games do, makes up for the levels being reused.
Hell, take some stages from Sonic Lost World or do a weird deep cut on a DS game or something. Anything except what was featured here.
And I actually like the selection of levels they picked from. And Sega, don't listen to Gerard, please. No Lost World cyberspace stages.
Yes, I think it would have been better if the game had uniquely designed level themes and layouts, but personally, I think when you're actually playing the game, it almost doesn't matter. The controls feel different enough where when going through a level based off of something like Sonic Adventure 2, for example, it's going to feel like an entirely different experience anyways.
And it feels like an entirely different experience in good and bad ways.
These Cyber Realm stages are literally what 3D Sonic games have been for the last several decades. Give or take a couple of things here and there.
And the give or take a couple things is the controls, which, counter to the open world, are absolutely awful here.
Cyberspace could have been really good, could have been really fun to play, but they messed it up because for some reason, when you enter cyberspace, the physics and the controls just change completely, and it's not in a good way.
The lightspeed dash is in this game, and that's great, but for some reason, every time Sonic performs it, he breaks at the end of the ring trail.
Yeah, you just come to a screeching halt with the ring dash. That's so weird.
No momentum on your jumps, a limp air boost, and lengthy homing attack chains.
To sum it up, Mr. Gotta Go Fast Sonic is quite slow in the cyberspace mode. Now, I'm not saying he inherently is slow, but all the things you would do in other Sonic games to speed up slow you down in this game.
He feels rather slow and stiff, and no settings can change this.
And if you've seen the side-by-side comparisons of the levels, Sonic's actually about just as fast here, but he feels really slow.
The first thing you'll notice when taking control of Sonic here is that he's a lot slower. Not just his base running speed, but also his boost, which may be the biggest difference between this game and the other boost games. Now, you might automatically assume that this is all a bad thing, but I actually think the reduced speed lends itself to more precise platforming a lot of the time.
This is for two reasons. One, the angle of the camera. Something that makes Generations in other boost games feel so fast is that the camera isn't high up looking down, but is behind you looking ahead. Another thing is a wide FOV, and anyone who's an FPS fan knows this, but there's something about upping your FOV and making your lens wider that makes the player feel like you're going way faster than you actually are. This is something Unleashed in Generations utilized really well, but here it wouldn't work for the levels imported from Sonic Adventure 2, so they ended up going with a hybrid that doesn't really satisfy either playstyle. When what they really should have done is just have it be different per stage. Crazy.
And what's even worse is how abysmally these controls are for Sonic. This open world control scheme was not built for linear hallways, and so trying to make it fit results in one of the worst controlling Sonics I think in the entire series. Every issue with open world Sonic is present here.
Also, all love to Mark, but the open world and cyberspace physics are definitely different here, and most of the issues in cyberspace, the open world doesn't have.
But the new moves that you acquire outside of the overworld cannot be used in any of the 2D or 3D Cyber Realm stages.
I think most people regarded the cyberspace stages as pretty fun, but definitely not the best part of the game.
Some of the new stuff Frontiers tries out, like the self-contained cyberspace levels within its open world, are fantastic ways to pack as much Sonic goodness as possible into one package.
The portal stages, the portal, like those look great. I love those.
But that doesn't mean that they're not enjoyable. I think the cyber worlds really stand out and I liked it a lot.
The only anomaly to this was one review who hated the open world and how he controlled there, as well as the game as a whole. But actually you would love the cyberspace physics. A very rare breed of person.
Anyway, the point is these levels look good and they have gameplay elements that are unique to them in a way that the open world doesn't. It has collapsible flooring, forcing you to move quickly. They have unique enemies that you don't find in other levels. They're a nice diversion, nice pacing, but as I said, they themselves are not enough to rescue this whole package.
But the most important aspect of the cyberspace levels is one I haven't talked about yet.
So that's going to be an F rank. What?
Now, to get an S rank in the cyberspace stages is actually really easy here. And this is something I liked, as it made getting S ranks achievable for someone like me, who's only decent at best at 3D Sonic games. And also makes it less frustrating since, man, are the physics bad here.
Now, they're super forgiving. This game's not a massive challenge by any means, but to get an S rank in a cyber world, you actually have to like try to suck dick in order to fuck it up.
Normally, I could care less about finding red rings in Sonic titles, but these levels aren't the main focus anymore, and the rings are very easy to find. And you don't have to do all 4 of these tasks at once, which is thankfully very forgiving.
Getting the last red ring here was such a pain because the controls are so stiff.
Okay, we'll ignore that guy. Getting the red rings is super easy.
There were quite a few cyberspace levels where I would accidentally get all 4 objectives. And I say accidentally because during those specific runs, I was purposely taking my time and even backtracking to collect the 5 red star rings. And I'd somehow still get an S rank.
And while the cyberspace stages are easy, there's one that every reviewer noted, which isn't a random spike in difficulty, since it's at the beginning of the game, but more so a balancing issue.
Especially because I was playing on hard mode, I expected a lot of these levels to be just as difficult as 1-2, and was pretty disappointed that I ended up getting S ranks on a ton of levels by accident.
Except for 1-2. Good golly gravy in the Navy. What is with this time requirement?
Oh, really? Only world 1-2 was hard for an S. What the fuck?
Funnily enough, the most fun I had in the entire game was during the first hour in level 1-2, where the S-rank speedrun timer is way tighter than any future level.
And I had a lot of fun completing 1-2, but not for the right reasons. I had fun trying to go fast and avoid all the gameplay elements that I'm supposed to want to get to go faster,
forcing me to spend a good 30 minutes learning the movement and labbing little skips and routes to make it in time. Couple that with some insanely catchy electronic jams, and despite fighting stiff controls and a rigid camera system, Cyberspace is where some of Sonic's spirit shines brightest.
Which is only fun, because you have to learn how to work around the jank. More often than not, trying to actively avoid the automated segments like springs and dash rings.
One thing I noticed across almost all reviews is that while corny at times, the story here is pretty good, especially in comparison to recent Sonic titles. Ooh.
The story and writing for this game is the best part of this game.
And there's some really amazing moments that do a lot of work to redeem some of these characters that us fans have been upset about for a long time.
So to see Tails actually talk about how he felt when Sonic got beat by Infinite and his whole 2010s character being someone who hides behind rocks feels really validating.
Is it one of the best penned scripts you've ever seen before? No, but there is a notable difference here compared to other Sonic games.
Still though, this is basically an incredibly long-winded way of saying the story for Frontiers has been the best we've seen in a long time.
However, it's not without its faults. Now, on paper, Sonic Frontiers plot-wise is very simple and straightforward. Plot progression is directly tied to the gameplay loop.
Plot progression is just kind of tied to like how much you're running around and messing around, so like that's cool.
Meaning you get a very good base story, at least in my opinion.
Make it so I have to actually do something to inspire the change in Sonic's friends that they talk about at the end.
And if you like it, you can go in and get more out of it. The perfect balance of not giving you too little story, but not overwhelming you with story.
However, while this may sound like a deceptively simple foundation, and for the most part it is, I feel that would do injustice to the vast amounts of substance contained within Sonic Frontiers' narrative. You're saving your friends, collecting the emeralds, stopping the Titans, those are your end goals for sure. But it's all the little things in between those goals that make Sonic Frontiers' story stand out in one of the best ways possible.
Like many compared to Breath of the Wild, Frontiers just drops you in the open world without too much setup or explanation and just gets you right in the game. And some people are gonna like that, and some just aren't.
You get in, you start the story, and you're in this world, but there's not a lot of like setup. Almost nothing is just naturally set up or explained. It's all just kind of like everything is just thrown at you in just like pure information. They're just giving you all of these like, here's what you do, here's how you do it. Like it just launches you right in. There's no build up. It's just kind of like, here's all this stuff, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of confusing.
And I'm just referring this story. Gameplay wise, having the little tutorial section and Cyberspace 1-1, I thought was a good enough grasp of everything you're going to need to play the game.
But this is one of the strangest setups to a Sonic game in a while.
But story-wise, a lot of the stuff in this game doesn't make sense. And again, that's not a bad thing, as it doesn't make sense for Sonic either.
Why did they kill themselves?
Sonic, they act like none of that happened.
Do we even know what that was?
Yeah, do they want to die? Are they like Meeseeks from Rick and Morty or something?
He's unfolding these mysteries as the player is as well. So while it's a story choice that might push a lot of people away initially, I like discovering the meaning behind all these things we're seeing alongside Sonic. It's kinda like Halo 3 ODST.
Sonic Frontiers has a grimdark, self-serious plot like it's a fucking Snyder movie, crossed with this weird, quippy humor that feels so awkward.
It has a much more serious tone story, and there's less of those really annoying out-of-place jokes that don't really add much to the dialogue.
But I just want to say that I've been enjoying the direction of the story, the more serious tone of the story. I think it's a really, really good call because Sonic did have great emotional story moments throughout its series, specifically in Adventure 1 and 2, you know.
This is the most serious Sonic's ever been. And if you told me that 2 years ago, I would have gone, oh no, they're going in a more serious direction. But I think it turned out for the best.
But the biggest surprise that I was delighted to see is how instead of simply adding to the lore such as Lost World and Forces, Frontiers instead chooses to expand the already existing elements, building off previous games and using that to tell their own tale, with the big thing answered here being, where did the Chaos Emeralds come from?
Sonic Frontiers decided to touch sacred ground, the Chaos Emeralds. We finally got an origin for them, and yeah, I agree with Mark here. I like that, oh no, it's not some new thing that somehow is more powerful than the Chaos Emeralds or it stops them or whatever, and it decides to be the first Sonic game to expand the lore in a long time.
Like I said, I get why some people wouldn't care for this plot point, but I mean, it's been 30 years. If they want to explain the Chaos Emerald's origins, then fine, why not?
Where this game's story shines is how it writes all of these characters and progresses them on personal journeys with Sonic, and other personal journeys that we'll talk about, even in the required cutscenes alone.
It's more about him witnessing his friends grow and move on towards a life where Sonic isn't always needed. Sonic's essentially the same as ever, the confident, free as the wind, wise ass that you can always count on doing the right thing.
Which I would say Sonic does actually have some character development here, but he's mostly the vessel for the player. There's tons of character development, but it's to all the characters around Sonic.
And it's great to see Sonic's friends no longer acting as glorified cheerleaders this time. And thanks to Sonic's friends and some of the things they talk about or go through, you're going to feel emotion, and as a result, you're going to be invested. I can count 3 times while playing this game where I felt a ball in my throat and my eyes started to well up with tears.
Including Eggman. In fact, the real surprise of Frontiers is this is actually an Eggman story.
Even getting my ass to genuinely get all misty-eyed towards the end. I'm not kidding. This game nearly broke me down.
This is the first ever Sonic game that attempts to make you feel sympathy for Eggman, and it surprisingly works.
It managed to get some little feels across to me, you know, like it's not bad.
One of the most interesting called shots in Frontiers is the characterization of Dr. Eggman himself. But in Sonic Frontiers, Eggman becomes multidimensional in more ways than one. Sage essentially becomes Eggman's surrogate daughter. Sage sees only the best in her maker/father. The player gets a glimpse of what Eggman as a father figure could look like. It is crazy to me that this game's narrative worked so well for me.
And this is not only enforced by the cutscenes between them, but how Sage talks about Eggman and acts, and all the other cutscenes that she's veering and watching from a distance.
The game wants to have its cake and eat it too. We don't really see him grow attached to her in the cutscenes, but the ending acts like it's obvious that you'd know this. If you didn't listen to these like me in my initial playthrough, this shit completely comes out of nowhere.
And egg memos aside, I think a lot of people didn't get this, or maybe even like it.
Hey, this is all pointless. You need to leave or you're gonna die. Why? Why the fuck would I tell you, asshole? Why say anything then?
When they're building up a relationship, yeah, she's not giving much information, she's not revealing the plot, but we're getting to see the character and a little understanding, and she keeps constantly throwing in little bits about how amazing Eggman is. It's actually the first time there's ever been build up to Sonic and Eggman working together, with her saying how much she wants it throughout the game, rather than at the last minute being like, we're not gonna make it if we don't work together, Sonic.
5 minutes later.
To conclude in this stuff, I'll say for sure that Sage has been the strongest villain from any Sonic game since, well, I want to say Shadow and Adventure 2.
But Sage going from an artificial intelligence program that he's made and impressed with to his literal daughter who becomes good, but was always good because she likes Eggman and Sonic, a dynamic we've literally never seen before. We've seen people go from bad to good, but we've never seen someone who's like, you know what, there's good people on both sides.
You can unlock these egg memos from the fishing gang, which had some cute lore references and stuff, but I gotta say, overall it was a bit of a bummer how Eggman had such a diminished presence in this game.
Now, the egg memos are neat, but I think a lot of reviewers are giving them too much credit. I felt super emotional over the story, and I didn't even see the memos until after I finished. And frankly, even then, it's mostly just cute little references. It didn't give me some stronger emotional impact. Oh, my heart.
I mean, he really did not have much to do this time.
Well, yeah, if you look at his completed shore list, he didn't do much this game, but I think that's kind of his purpose. He's not an antagonist you're fighting here. In fact, I wouldn't even say he's an antagonist at all.
Like, yeah, they had that little, I'll let you join the Koopa Troop scene, which was fine and all, but I wish he'd just been in the game a bit more. Even if he wasn't going to be the main villain, you know, that's fine. He doesn't always have to be the main bad guy, but he's just such a fun character to have around, you know?
While sure, he did cause the plot, every move this game makes pushes him away from being an antagonist. We feel sympathy for him. We feel an emotional attachment to him. We see him being a good person. And lastly, he helps out Sonic, and even does a little likable joke before it. My hope is that they don't revert this and go, lol, Eggman's actually a terrible guy again. But since we've seen him so much, you know, maybe put him on the back burner and make him like a neutral guy for a while.
Come on. Come on, little Pikmin. Let's go look for a place to die.
But story's good. I'll cover the end in its own part, because most people didn't regard that as nearly as good. But next, let's move into the combat. There's about 3 different types of opinions when it comes to this.
It's safe to say that combat system is awesome in this game. It beats Sonic Unleashed.
The combat in this game is fine.
On the other hand, one of the big things Frontiers tries that doesn't work well is combat.
Now, I think the combat is fine. I would say it's good, but I wouldn't say it's amazing.
Combat in this game is not the most graceful thing I've experienced. Early on, you're just mashing the attack button, no different than how it worked in Shadow's gameplay in Sonic 06.
Sonic has an entire skill tree too, giving him some of the coolest abilities he's ever had. Like, there's some moves straight out of Dragon Ball Z here. It's awesome. My only gripe is that I was able to unlock all the abilities pretty early on, so it felt like I was collecting skill points for nothing for a large portion of the game.
It's a nice spectacle, and it's fun to do, I guess. But after a while, and I'm pretty sure almost everyone does this, but I just turned on auto combo, which I guess is why you unlock it. But the combat really is take it or leave it for me.
You're just mashing buttons to pull off simple combos and knock the snot out of faceless robotic enemies.
And I guess if you really hate the combat, you can basically skip it altogether by just buying the gears from the fishing minigame.
And just like the rest of Frontiers, how you want to play is optional and up to you.
There's this one in Ares Island, where if it catches you, it'll steal your Chaos Emerald, kind of like the bird from Mario 64 who takes your hat. And I wish there were more enemies like that, ones that would just surprise me, you know?
Ironically, this and the circling like hyena whatever robots, I came to absolutely hate. I liked all the mini-bosses pretty much, but these two in particular drag you out of whatever you're doing and force you to engage. You can't leave the hyena one, and yeah, I guess you could leave the one that takes your Chaos Emerald, but now you're down a Chaos Emerald.
I soon came to resent being yanked out of my lightning speed racing just to smack down another bunch of dumb toaster-looking fools.
What I loved about Frontiers combat, and Frontiers as a whole, is that it lets you pick your own path and play the game how you want to play it.
And then I ended up making my own rule set. So I did a combo, I beat up one of its arms, and then when I got blasted off of it, I hopped back in again through an air dash and landed on top again. I didn't even have to run back up. I circumvented the challenge through the game's tool set and created my own way around the boss and did double damage just like that. I prefer a more flexible system with jank than something that's heavily structured. So yes, you could follow these portals up the side of this boss and take it out that way, and you will probably do that your first time, but you could also run up different sides of the boss that are completely open. You just won't have that speed boost. So I get that the visual design pulls you to go to those things, but you can do it your own way.
Which is something about the open world Frontiers nails. So these two enemies in particular do the exact opposite of that.
I recall reaching this drawbridge in the third island way before it became plot important, but you can still climb it, and on the other side, you can see another island. I was still curious if I could make the jump to the other side, but that didn't matter because it's another invisible wall, and I was like, oh, come on. I think the game should have rewarded players for thinking outside the box.
And while there are some obvious things it doesn't let you do, like this bridge, which I agree, I would think to do the same thing, and they probably should have just made it angled up higher so that you can't run up it. However, in that same section, there actually is something you can do, and they place a perfectly sized skip right next to it. Also, I thought he was referring to a different part. This is not right next to that. It's not even the same island.
There are a lot of them too, but you don't need to defeat that many to progress through the main story.
Now, in terms of traversal and exploring the open world, there's like next to no freedom here. And when you do decide to go explore some interesting looking nook, you get rewarded with nothing.
After beating the game, I was just kind of standing on Island 1's tower and looking at Island 4's area. From here, I was able to see that there was a wall run path leading to somewhere on the side of the map. I was curious, so I booted up Island 4, ran to the area I saw, took the secret path on the side of the wall, and was greeted with nothing. And speaking of which, I feel like Island 4 had way more going for it, but was scrapped late in development. And I feel this way because there are platforms in the world that lead to nothing.
So yeah, maybe traversal-wise, there's not that much freedom, but when it comes to gameplay choice and what you want to play, there is full freedom here.
But how you go about finding the collectibles, how you go about finding the vault keys, portal gears, and all that is completely up to you. You build your own experience here.
And this brings me to Big's fishing, and how this is actually a key piece to freedom of gameplay choice.
90% of this game's budget just went into making the 3D models for the fish on this.
Literally like 20 minutes of playing the fishing game, and you can like max out all your like, I'm telling you, the economy is just like, it's nonsense.
And nonsense in a good way. With mixed reception coming in from the ranges of combat to cyberspace, Big's fishing is an alternative to help alleviate that, so no matter what it is you don't want to do, you have a choice to progress this optional way.
Again, this is another notch in the column of player freedom that lets Sonic Frontiers engage with its fans so effectively.
This game's economy is totally broken sometimes. The Big's fishing isn't everywhere, and I personally didn't use it like that at first, but by the 5th island, I was tired of the cyberspace stages.
And, sometimes I'd be like, okay, I gotta go play one of the, I'd grumble a little bit when I had to go play the level.
By the time you're done, have a feeling you're not going to want to touch them ever again.
And said, you know what? I've got pockets of purple coins. Let's fish it up. And I had a lot of fun.
I could go back and fish with Big. That was something I was excited to see return. But it appears that Sega were so afraid to create a fishing minigame that came off as annoying like in Sonic Adventure, that they went out of their way to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, it's not tedious like Sonic Adventures, and I think that's great. It's not super hard, it's not even slightly hard. It's fun and stimulating, and to hammer in that experience of just being stimulating, they literally have lo-fi music on the background. That's like the entire purpose of lo-fi.
And it's incredibly relaxing and also breaks the game if you want it to.
But then on the other hand, it means that people can focus on what they want to focus on. If you're more into fishing than running around, then you can spend a lot of time fishing and get loads and loads of stuff to legitimately power you up and move you through the story.
Just like how many new games have a story or narrative difficulty that's way above easy, Big's fishing is Frontier's equivalent of that.
Going back to player freedom, if you think about it, Big the Cat in his fishing hole allows you to sidestep a lot of the gameplay choices that you may not like.
And with that, let's move to a section of the game that people overall do like. The Titan boss battles.
The bosses in Sonic Frontiers are absolutely phenomenal. It makes every previous Sonic boss look like a baby.
Titan bosses feel like the best parts of a Sonic Adventure boss fight. Every Titan feels unique, and transforming into Supersonic is always a thrill.
Whether it be homing attacking fallen rubble, running away and dodging its missiles, or running on the pathway created by another enemy to avoid the spinning saw blade it's throwing at you. All of these moments were wonderful additions, and I only wish there were more. Which, now that I think about it, is how I'd sum up the whole game in general.
These fights are fun, simple chapter enders, and they're the big spectacle of the game. However, instead of one supersonic fight at the end of a game, there's one per island, and they do a bit to make them each feel unique.
Stop spinning like this shit isn't a real game. Stop spinning. That's it, Gigantic. What the fuck?
But in terms of gameplay, it's pretty easy, and I have to guess they're only seen as the highlight of the game due to the spectacle. They're pure style over substance.
Which I will say on hard, it is pretty easy to run out of rings, so I wouldn't say they're ultra easy, but they're incredibly simple. And I actually think that's how I would sum up a lot of the critiques about this game. I've always seen Sonic as simple to grasp, but hard to master. But I think a lot of people just want Sonic to be hard to grasp, hard to master.
The first three are easy but fun. The last one is fucking terrible in my opinion.
And I actually thought the last one was great. It's just like the other ones, but it has this obstacle making it more challenging. Isn't that what we wanted?
Duke it out with a giant robot.
Something I forgot to cover in the combat, because there's so many things I could talk about with this game, but especially comes into play in the Titan boss fights, is the parry. And oh man.
It's kind of a strange choice to make the parry not timing dependent at all. Like, they could have just given it a really generous window if they wanted it to be easy.
If they want to have no timing, that would make sense for easy mode. And if they want to make it doable, they could have a wide window of time.
This game, I'm not afraid anymore. I can just hover in midair. What?
But for there to be no skill required to pull off a perfect parry, even on hard mode, it's just kinda lame. And it's a design choice I wish they didn't make.
The fact that they gave Sonic a skill tree was promising, but make no mistake, this isn't some crazy Devil May Cry combo weaving or precise Souls-like dodging and parrying.
There's nothing more satisfying than perfectly blocking attacks or doing the royal release at the right time as Dante in Devil May Cry 5.
If I wanted to play Devil May Cry, I'd play Devil May Cry.
What's with these guys in Devil May Cry? Oh, I know, the same thing plaguing every reviewer. As Teddy Roosevelt once said, comparison is the thief of joy. People cannot help themselves from comparing Frontiers to basically any other video game, the most common one being Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
The Breath of the Wild inspiration is pretty obvious. Large open spaces with different biomes and collectibles, smaller chunks of familiar gameplay to break it up, the all-white HUD, the boost gauge being replaced by the stamina meter from Zelda.
The open world gameplay takes some very obvious inspiration from Breath of the Wild, but I don't think this is a bad thing at all.
So, to state the obvious, this game is taking heavy inspiration from Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like, I already knew that going in, but goddamn, they were really inspired, huh? You've got your shrines, your little overworld puzzles, your little guides that are used for upgrades, the purple coins found in out-of-the-way locations.
Wait a minute, Cybershell, that's not Breath of the Wild.
If I were to really connect this game to anything, I think more of Super Mario Odyssey, which I think is a much better comparison. Like you could say tone-wise, and specifically these hub areas, it is like Breath of the Wild, but that's as far as I would go.
A much more fitting comparison would actually be Mario Odyssey.
Mario Odyssey, but Sonic the Hedgehog's take on it.
I would compare it more to Super Mario Odyssey than Breath of the Wild.
And think of it like Sonic Mario Odyssey, but with all the problems of Halo Infinite's open world. There's a feeling of care and detail that Mario Odyssey has in its worlds, and both Sonic Frontiers and Halo Infinite literally are like 80% forests.
But in my opinion, I think Sonic Frontiers is a good step in the right direction for the series.
And as you've seen so far, many of these points have been divisive and nobody's really agreed. However, there's one part that everyone agrees on.
But it's just not fully realized yet, and I do think they can get there in the future as long as they commit to like improving this formula. They got the great groundwork right now.
Before the game released, people talked about how Frontiers is a solid foundation to continue building the series from going forward. I admit, I scoffed at the idea simply because I remember people saying that exact same thing about Sonic Lost World when it came out 9 years ago.
Wait, what are you talking about? I have never once in my entire life ever heard of someone looking at Lost World and saying, what a great foundation for the entire future of Sonic. I've never even heard someone call that game amazing.
Hopefully this is just the beginning of a glorious comeback for everyone's favorite Speedy Hedgehog.
Sonic Frontiers really reminds me of Pokemon Legends Arceus, where like, you've got the blueprints here for something. Like, I don't know if they're going to continue in this direction for Sonic. I know they have a history of just kind of flushing it all down the toilet and starting over, but I certainly hope they try this again.
I am very curious as to how they intend to follow this up. If this game sells well, they may iterate on the open world concept, which could be interesting, especially if they address some of the complaints people have about Frontiers.
But it's still a lot of fun to play, and I see the potential for the formula here.
No matter what you think about Frontiers, there's a good base underneath it that can be expanded into something great in the future. Even the people who think this game is awful agree the potential is there. It's just, some people think the potential was wasted here. There's a bunch of other smaller topics like the end, references, a few other things, and I wanted to transition everything as smoothly as possible, but I just couldn't with these. So, lightning round!
That was on par with Dark Gaia, easy.
Or saved me from the Deadly Six's trap.
It's almost up there with the Eclipse Cannon.
Like on the egg carrier?
You stopped the art, overcame Neo Metal. I wonder if Cream and Styx are free.
Sonic Boom is canon? If there were one thing I started to notice as I kept playing, it's that Ian Flynn seems a little too trigger happy on the name dropping, which comes off as dangling keys in front of a Sonic fan's face when it serves no real purpose, and just feels like referencing for the sake of referencing.
It's one of my favorite things about this game's story. Sonic Frontiers does not hesitate to call back to a whole bunch of Sonic's past adventures, mainly the earlier 3D games, starting from Adventure and onward.
There are callbacks to everything in this game, and it doesn't even feel forced either.
What are you? Makes me think of the Falls and Mystic Ruins.
But I will say, sometimes they lay it on a little thick. Like the first few times it happened, it was a pleasant surprise, but after that, I was still enjoying it, but it was kind of like, okay, so when's the next name drop coming up?
The way this game respects its history of these characters feels incredibly authentic.
I kind of feel validated. It's like, yeah, these characters have experienced all that. They have explored these stories that they're constantly referencing. And my God, they're not just doing it for the sake of fan service, but it's a driving force of this game's stellar character development.
Stellar? Yes and no. While I do like references, it does feel like sometimes they're laying it on way hard. Whoa, look at that dumpster over there. Marine the raccoon sure would love that. Yeesh, you've been gaining weight. Tried the Big the Cat diet lately? Man, I'm so bored. Like the Think Jet the Hawk rides. I feel like the references should have been used a little bit less, but I don't mind them. I actually prefer the more generic ones that happen while you're in the open world, because then they at least feel more paced out than the story ones, which is like, okay, Dark Gaia, Chaos Emeralds, Styx, Blaze. It's just like, okay, I get it.
But again, that's just a minor complaint, and ultimately I'd take acknowledging its history over not at all.
Couldn't agree more, Mark. Next, let's go on to the end. Like how some people are unanimously positive, with this, people are unanimously negative.
But I could not fathom that this minigame was basically going to be retextured and used as the final fight. which is tough, genuinely. It takes a lot of hits and took me like 20 minutes to get through.
And I like that they put the hacking mission earlier solely to prepare you for this. Like, I know you played the game in chronological order, but they didn't reskin the hacking mission for the boss. It's very clearly the other way around. Build up and payoff.
But it wasn't fun, and most importantly, it wasn't Sonic.
But I think this is another case of
Sonic fans just simply want to have more Sonic.
As I personally found it fun.
It's another sudden gameplay shift, and I normally hate when Sonic games do that shit. I gave the pinball game earlier shit for that, but I love shoot-'em-ups.
And people act like this is the final boss.
Who really decided that the final boss should be a purple moon named The End?
When the Titan before this is the final boss, which he said was annoyingly difficult. This is just like a bonus at the end.
You know, on one hand, playing Ikaruga is really cool, but on the other hand, what the fuck?
Oh yeah, why is the final boss discount Ikaruga? Like, what the hell? Seriously. I don't even know what to say about this.
In fact, you don't even get this unless you're playing on hard.
Oh yeah, and apparently this whole phase only shows up if you're set to hard difficulty, which of course I was because I'm a gamer, but that is kind of weird.
So this isn't even like a universal experience across the whole game.
But yeah, this minigame is a lot like Ikaruga, a GameCube game that nobody remembers.
Well, clearly a lot of people remember it because every review has mentioned it.
I was shocked this was the final boss. Utterly stunned, and then annoyed because you have almost no health to survive this war of attrition that ultimately took me over 25 minutes to beat.
Everything the Ben Shapiro dude says just hurts me, because beating the end, just like all the Titans, was so easy. In fact, I didn't want to finish it so I could hear all the audio stuff because I was like, what if I miss something? There's not too much else to say about the end. I didn't hate it like a lot of people did, but I didn't necessarily love it or even really like it. I just thought it was alright. I know people don't like the fact that it's a moon design, but in my opinion, simple is fine. Sure, I was expecting an even bigger Titan, but that would have been so cliche and generic. I mean, we all predicted that. How cool is something that we're all predicting?
I gave the pinball game earlier shit for that.
And a minute after that, you're playing a game of pinball inside of an active volcano.
Now, if you're a gamer zoomer like me, you might not have even known people were struggling with this. I sure didn't.
You can speed this up by grabbing red rings and increasing the multiplier, and it caps at 256, so once you reach that, it's only a couple more minutes before you win. But that means jack shit when the ball decides to just fall off the sides or when it just falls straight down the middle.
Can I get a replay on that? I don't know, but it looks like you could have hit the you could have hit the paddle, but
shit that's completely out of your control.
I understand some of the challenges that confuse people, like the one where you have to align all the lights.
I hate this. The sun is going down now. I'm still doing the
which it only took me a couple minutes to do, but I could see how it would be frustrating.
Some of the minigames are fun, but some can get annoying. The lantern puzzle can take quite a while to get right, and the pinball is a complete pace breaker.
But the pinball I found really easy. And at first I was intimidated by the points, and then I realized the gimmick. I was like, oh. And some people were like, why'd they make a big number? Anyone saying that has clearly not played real pinball. It's satirizing how high the numbers get in that, which it's like insane if you've ever played an old school cabinet. And I found it really easy. In my entire time, I only lost one ball. And I'm not one to tell people to get good, so I'm just going to move on to the next topic.
I did find myself feeling blue because of the absurd amount of pop-in that happens every time this famously fast character does his thing.
It's insane to go this long in a Sonic Frontiers review and not even mention the pop-in.
To address the most obvious glaring technical flaw, the pop-in is absolutely horrendous in this game.
But that's because this is something that didn't affect me too much. And while I did notice it, and maybe it's just because I'm on like the current gen of consoles.
No matter the version, and for the record, I'm playing this on the PlayStation 5, this issue is always apparent.
But it didn't affect my gameplay or platforming at all.
So part of the gameplay loop of Sonic Frontiers, and this is not exaggeration,
well,
is to move toward things to see if some part of the level pops in so that you can use it. I'm for real, man, my god.
While visible, the pop-ins are definitely out of reach of your Sonic. Maybe if you're on a Switch or like Xbox One, that's not the case. But at least for modern hardware, I can't be judging this game on old hardware. I thought the pop-ins weren't even that bad. And if that's the worst technical issue Frontiers has, then I'd call it a W.
My immersion was broken about every 5 seconds when large objects popped into view right in front of me.
I don't know, when even in the gameplay clip shown you have to look for the pop-in, you don't even just immediately notice it, I personally wouldn't call that immersion breaking.
But after a bit, it's something I just stopped paying attention to, so I don't think it's a deal breaker. But I wish they approached this differently.
And I'm not dick writing for Sega. I do wish the pop-ins weren't there, but at the same time, I'm not going to lie and be like, oh, I'm so mad, when really, it's not something that was that noticeable or disruptive to me.
The pop-in was always a common issue.
I'm not going to go too much into it because I already made another video talking about it, but fans have figured out how to fix these pop-ins and that they were intentionally set by Sonic Team, and with an upcoming 2023 update schedule for the game, this is something I really do think they're going to fix, so I don't want to go into it too hard since there's a good chance this entire criticism will be irrelevant in a few months. And if that's what's holding back Frontiers for you, I don't know, buy like a better console or PC or something. Install the mod that fixes pop-ins, I don't know.
I didn't expect that voice. Cool.
Another thing a lot of people are talking about is the voice acting, and that's another thing I don't feel too strongly about.
Kind of an aside, I won't go on too long. I really don't like Sonic's voice actor, or Knuckles. I don't even know where the fandom stands on this. I don't like this current voice actor. It just doesn't fit. It's Sonic. He needs something. I just hear Chris Redfield. He's just like a guy, just like a 40-something guy. I don't know. This doesn't really work. I don't like it.
I didn't like it at first, but it did wear on me.
The voice acting in this game is also pretty good too across the board. Apart from a few awkward deliveries from Sonic, you can tell Roger in this game toned his voice down a little bit and isn't trying so hard, and it did take some getting used to, but I thought it was okay. Not the best Sonic performance, but a nice change.
It still does feel a little too deep for Sonic. It's a little eerie. Roger's previous Sonic was already questionably deep.
I like Roger Craig Smith as a voice actor, but his performance as Sonic isn't bad. It just doesn't feel like it represents the character as he is. And that goes with both the direction of the voice as well as the writing. I think both here have improved.
So this more serious one is even deeper. Other than that, I think everyone's really good. Some people were upset with Knuckles, but I thought it was good. Everyone's doing a bit of a less cartoony, high-pitched voice here, including Mike Pollock as Eggman, and for the tone of Frontiers, this worked really well.
Instead, the story building is serious, and it actually works because of the voice actors' stellar performances.
And I'm going to give my final rating on it. This is what everyone's been waiting for. We've gone through 12 hours of Sonic reviews. The video's almost an hour long. But first, did you know I'm hosting the 14th annual Sonic Awards this year? And there's going to be categories such as Best Creator, and I obviously didn't nominate myself, Best Up-and-Coming Creator, Biggest Enemy of the Sonic Community, Best Sonic Project Overall, Fan Music, tons of categories. All you need to fill it out is a Google account, because it's through Google Forms. And I'll have a link to vote pinned on my Twitter, which is in the description. Now, my final rating. I'd give Sonic Frontiers, and we're not doing half points. I don't believe in that. An 8 out of 10. Everyone said it, but the formula for a better game is here, and I'm glad they took a lot of risks and tried a lot of new things here, and many of them worked. So now we just need to hope they can figure out what worked and what didn't work and make the next game the ultimate 3D Sonic game ever. And with the way the new Sonic team is looking, I actually have a lot of faith in them. So with that, we've almost hit an hour, which we desperately have to go under. So quickly, lots of love, check the Twitter for the vote link, and peace. Peace!
Too weird. Huh? No. What? Come on. What? Chaos control. What? Now. Hey, let go. Yo. What's up? Ready? Oh, now what? Check. Go. Hurry up. Oh, yeah. Hold it. What? No. I'll nail that Eggman. No. Chaos has transformed again. No. That's not gonna happen, buddy. No. Just remember, no fighting.